In the grand scheme of building a home gym, barbell collars are definitely low on the totem pole, but they should not be overlooked. Today we're going to look at 4 different collars, 2 of which I've been using for years, with 2 new entrants into the space that I've been testing for the last couple months to tell you what I'm still using in 2026. Let's go. What's up guys, Kyle with hypertrophy.com, the best place to design your home gym and develop your training program. While the barbell collar may not be the most exciting piece of equipment in your gym, it is very worthwhile to pay attention to because there are a lot of different collars out there and they all have a couple different strengths and weaknesses. And there is no one best collar, I will tell you that right away. There's always going to be a trade-off for how strongly it holds something onto the bar and how easy it is to use. And then on top of that, there's also a number of options out there that provide their own kind of special features beyond the basics. So what we've got today are 4 different barbell collars. The 2 in the middle are the ones that I've been using for the last 5-6 years, ever since I've had a home gym. And those are the Lockjaw Olympic collars and the Rogue USA aluminum collars. And the reason that I use these 2 sets specifically is because the Lockjaws are my go-to for just about everything, my daily use collar, except for deadlifts and Olympic lifts, or anything where weight is going to be hitting the floor and more likely to loosen up over time. The Lockjaws are incredibly lightweight, incredibly easy to close. You can do it very easily with a single hand. And the Rogue aluminums are a little bit harder to open and close, but they are incredibly strong, and even on over 500-pound deadlifts, they barely move at all. So that's why I have both of these. It's why I use them both regularly and why I have 2 different kinds. Now, the 2 new sets that we're looking at here were both sent to me for review. One is also from Lockjaw. These are the Lockjaw machine collars, and you'll notice that these actually have a carabiner stuck to them, and that is because you can hook chains onto these, which is a really interesting feature, which we will get into in the review itself. And then on the other side, we have a very wild looking collar from Keppi Fitness, and these are their open collars. These snap together to close around the barbell, and so they create that friction point on the inside, but they can just slot right on top of the bar and go from there. They're also magnetic, so they can stick to your rack, and you actually don't even need to close both sides of these, so you can get away with just closing one side, and especially if it's not necessary to hold a ton of weight, then that is perfectly adequate. So we're going to go through each of these, what the highs and lows are, because there are trade-offs for each of them, how they relate in terms of price, and then I've got a semi-scientific test to show just how strong each of them are. The first factor we're going to discuss is the holding strength, as this is the main function of the barbell collar. I put each of these collars through 3 rounds of putting a 45-pound plate on one end of the barbell, picking it up and dropping it onto the floor to see how much movement that would create from the edge of the sleeve to the collar. So I did each collar 3 times, and with the Keppis I actually tried both with both tabs closed and a single tab closed, and the strongest one out of the bunch was actually the Lockjaw machine collar. This one over the 3 rounds came in at 0.6 inches, followed up in a close second place of the Rogue USA's, which were 0.66 inches, and then behind that was the Keppi with the 2 collars closed at 0.895 inches, and then finally the Lockjaw Olympics at 1.33. And then actually behind that, the Keppis with just one tab closed, was at 1.56. So by far the 2 front runners for overall strength are the Lockjaw machine in number 1 and the Rogue USA's in a very tight number 2. I could pretty much toss these up between one another because, again, this is not super scientific test and they're within 1/10 of an inch on this test, but the technical winner is the Lockjaw machines. And this level of strength is really only relevant when we're talking about doing movements that really require it being tight over the course of the set, namely deadlifts, Olympic lifts, or anything where you're dropping the bar to the floor. If you're just doing bench press, squat, curls, you really don't need a ton of additional resistance there. And the Lockjaw Olympics and the Keppis, even with a single tab closed, are more than capable of doing just about any regular work like that. So don't think that you need the tightest thing in the world, but when you do want it for those higher rep deadlift sets, that's when these two types of collars are going to be very valuable. Now, strength of the collars alone is far from the whole story, and that's because the majority of the time that you are using these, you're not going to need them to be at full strength. So how easy it is to take them on and off the bar is a huge variable to look out for. So we're going to start with the Lockjaw Olympics, which are my daily driver for everything because they are so simple. Slide them onto the bar and you can very easily close this thing with one hand, fully clamped, no issues whatsoever, and then take it off just as easily. I don't know if you can ever beat this because it is just so simple and it still holds pretty well for what it is. So that is the mark to beat. The next one we'll look at is the other one that I use regularly, which are the Rogue USAs. So these have a much higher level of tension in the clip, and they are not too bad to get on, but getting them off is a little bit harder. Again, not the hardest thing in the world, but it's definitely something worth considering. I never really put these on with one hand. It's possible for me, but again, it's challenging. So that's part of why I don't use these for every single exercise that I'm doing. Now we'll take a look at these other two. You can actually see, so the Keppi is actually up here from its magnets alone. It's not holding on to anything else, which is a pretty cool special feature with this one. And actually a lot of variants of these collars do come magnetized. So it's not just a Keppi thing, but for the one that I have in my hand, this is the singular one that is magnetized. But with this one, we can, instead of having to slide this on from the end, we can actually just go straight to wherever we want to put it and then single clip or double clip. Now I will say putting one clip down is extremely easy. The second clip to go down is a little bit harder. It's not terrible, but it is a little bit more work to do than definitely the Olympic collars from Lockjaw. Now where this is a little bit more difficult is pulling it apart. So pulling this apart with one hand is doable, but again, it's not the easiest because you have to get underneath that little clamped part. So if there was some more space in here, that might be a little bit nicer because that can get a little bit jammed up and a little bit pinchy, but it's not too bad. Again, if you're doing this with two hands, it's really not an issue, but this is still not going to be quite as easy to go on and off, I think, as the Olympic collars. I do really like the over-the-top collar placement, and if there was some way that they could put a mechanism in here so that when you push this down on the bar, it closed by itself automatically, that would be pretty cool. But this does not do that, and I don't actually know of any that do that. If there are, let me know in the comments. And then the final one we'll look at is the Lockjaw machine. So remember, this is the one that was the strongest, and I will tell you right away that this is by far the hardest to close, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this open with one hand because this is a long lever. There we go, we got it. So it is possible, but by far the hardest collars to use. And having had these in for a while now, I can tell you that they are a pain to get on and off. Partly why they're so strong is because they have a very strong clamping mechanism, but that also means they're just going to be hard to use. So if you don't need all of the strength all of the time, you're probably not going to want to deal with these, unless of course you are using the carabiner for the chains, which we will talk about next. So in terms of ease on and off the bar, without question, the winner is still the Lockjaw Olympic collars. I absolutely love these. And then I think the Keppis are coming in second with a very unique design. They're not perfect, but it's a really cool take on a collar. And I think there is definitely something here that can be improved upon. The Rogue USA is still not bad to use, but definitely a little bit more high tension than these two. And finally, the Lockjaw machine in last place, in this one being by far the hardest on and off the bar. And then while we're over here, I do want to go into the special features of each of these. So like I said, the Keppis do come magnetized, and there are variants of all of these other collars that do come magnetized. So that is not just a Keppi thing, but this is nice. And this magnet is strong enough so that if you're shaking this rack it's not actually going to go anywhere. So it's very stable. The two other collars that are my mainstays don't have any built-in special features. Like I said, there are variants of these that come magnetized, but I do not own them. And these are actually the original Rogue USA aluminums. They have a V2, which supposedly works even better and is even easier on and off the bar. I've not tried them, but that is available, and they do have magnetized versions of those too. The most interesting one in the special features department, though, is by far the lockjaw machines, and that's because of this carabiner. So the idea with this is that now you have a point of attachment for chains, or I guess you could even throw bands on this, and I will demonstrate with our chains over here. So what I normally do is I have this connector chain just set up as a loop so that I can throw this around and then throw some other collar around that and be able to hook in. But the idea with this lockjaw machine collar is that instead of needing to do that, now you can hook in to the carabiner itself. And I have used this and it does work well. The only kind of downside to this is that it becomes more cumbersome to take this on and off if you were changing weights. If you were just set at a single weight, not needing to change it, then that doesn't become an issue. But I've also never really had any trouble loading chains onto a barbell before. And one of the other things to think about with this that I wasn't initially aware of until I started using it is that on a regular barbell where the sleeves spin, this isn't a problem because the carabiner is going to point down. But I do have other bars, specifically like my Mars bar, where the sleeves do not spin. And the problem with that is that when you unrack the bar, if this isn't positioned with the carabiner down, you can actually get into a point where the chains are loaded up unevenly from side to side because of how this is angled and twisted. Again, on a sleeve that rotates, it's not a problem, but on a fixed sleeve, that is a problem. Is this actually worth it to have the carabiner attached to the collar? I honestly don't think so. It kind of just seems like a gimmick to me. Again, the collar itself is extremely strong, so it's not like the collar is bad, but it's hard to get on and off the bar, and the special feature of the chain connection is just not something that I'm seeing as being a problem that needs to be solved. So while it's an interesting idea, in practice, I don't think it's as valuable as some of these other just standard collars. And the final thing to look at is the price. And honestly, all of these collars are pretty close to one another. Now, I will say I do have a lockjaw discount code, which will take 20% off your order. If you just go through my affiliate link, then that will be applied automatically. So that does skew some of these a little bit, but the MSRP of these collars is going to be $40 for the Keppis, $40 for the Lockjaw Olympics, $45 for the Rogue USAs, and $50 for the machines. But again, these two are both Lockjaws, so those 20% discounts do apply to both of them. And with that discount code, that brings the $40 of this down to about $32, making these the cheapest. And then that brings the $50 mark down to $40, meaning that these can actually be had a little bit cheaper than both the Rogues and basically the same price as the Keppis. The Rogues also do have to pay for shipping. I believe they fit into their buy 3 ship free program, but I'm not entirely sure. So they're all in a very similar price category. The Rogue USAs used to be like 70, 80 bucks. So these are, the Gen 1s are actually a lot cheaper. The version 2s are a little bit more expensive. And then if you want the magnetized versions of any of these, they do get a little bit more expensive by like 10 to 20 bucks. But again, all relatively reasonable. So the biggest value and biggest bang for your buck, I would say, are definitely going to be the Lockjaw Olympics. At $32 after that discount code savings, these are just what I think are the best all-around collars for daily use. They can still hold up fine in the deadlift, but you will notice a little bit of slop after those sets. But in terms of just doing everything else, these are so easy on and off the bar and so effective that they still have not been usurped, in my opinion. I do think that the Keppis are a very compelling option. If they were a little bit easier to take off and unclamp, then they might be able to give the lockjaws a run for their money. But overall, still a really solid value. They hold up really well to that drop test and to actual deadlift testing, and the value is there as well at 40 bucks. The Rogue USAs are still going to be my go-to deadlift collar because they are very strong, right there neck and neck with the machines, but much easier to get on and off. Definitely not as easy as the Lockjaw Olympics, but still relatively easy to do so. And then the machine lockjaws, while they did win the strength test, I don't think I'm ever going to really use these just because of how much of a pain they are to get on and off the bar. That and the carabiner attachment doesn't really do anything for me. There could be some setups where that has some value for you, but in my case, it's just not there. So these, while really good in the strength department, are just not going to really be something that I use moving forward. I want to thank Keppi and Lockjaw for sending both of these out for review, but these two are still going to be coming away as my winners in 2026. So let me know what you guys thought of this video. If you have collars that are your favorites that you've been using for a long time, let me know about them and what you use them for. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will catch you again in the next one.